Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I logged on to chess.com recently, planning to play a few casual blitz games, and somehow ended up on a 5 game win streak, which brought me back to over 1700. Interestingly, all the games that I played in this video were Sicilians, and the variations were either Alapins or Kalashnikovs. So this video will also help with understanding the theory in these two specific openings. Now we'll go straight into the first game. So I played e4, my opponent plays c5, the Sicilian, knight f3, knight c6, d4, getting into the open lines, c takes, knight takes, and e5. And this brings us into the Kalashnikov. Now the Kalashnikov is a close cousin to the Sveshnikov, where black first plays knight f6, attacking the pawn. We play knight c3 defending, and now black follows it up with e5. And here white has to play, or rather the most common move is knight b d5. So white plays this move, attacking this square, right? Now, the difference with the Kalashnikov is black doesn't play an early knight c6, knight f6 rather. Instead, they play e5 right away. And just like in the Sveshnikov, we follow it up with knight b5. Now, in this position, white is attacking. I'm attacking the d6 square. So if black doesn't do anything, let's say they play a passive move, we could put our knight here and black's position is cramped because the knight is attacking all these pieces, right? If the bishop takes, same thing. We are still cramping black's position, and black has to waste a lot of time making moves to liberate their position while we develop our pieces as well. So as you can see, white will end up with a big advantage if in this variation. Oh, sorry for that. So d4 takes e5, knight b5, and then here as a response black plays d6 because now there are two defenders on this square. Now unlike the Sveshnikov, the Kalashnikov gives us the option of playing c4 here because in the Sveshnikov this knight is already developed. So one of the downsides of this move order is that now we have the option of bringing this knight in easily with more space because we have two pawns now defending this d5 square. Now, my opponent plays a6, kicking my knight back, and then follows it up with knight f6. This is normal moves. Now, the table base tells me that the most frequently played move is knight e2, and then knight e7. So this is how play typically continues. And here we just utilize the control that we have, the most space that we have to sort of like um, control the position. So this is the main line. I'm just clicking next on the main line in table base. So this is one of the positions that you might get in this variation. But because I haven't studied or looked at theory in a long time, this position here is basically where my knowledge ends. And much like the Sveshnikov, I decided to go bishop g5 because I thought this is the natural move, and takes, and now we put a knight on d5. So the plan is the same. We're trying to restrict the movement of black's pieces. So the moves that you see highlighted in green here are some of the best moves according to the engine. So according to the stockfish. So right now it's on depth 30 cloud, as you can see, but those are the best moves in the position. I'm attacking the bishop. I don't really intend to take it. I just want to cramp down on black's position. My opponent follows it up with castles. I play a normal move, bishop e2. The computer would rather have me play bishop d3, but bishop e2 was played in this game. g6, black is trying to give their bishop breathing room. I castle. They bring their bishop back. I develop my knight, and then black follows it up with f5, trying to gain more space. Now, like I said, the moves highlighted in green are the best moves in this position, but I decided to develop my queen because I want to connect the rooks here, right? And apparently this is not the most testing move. However, it's only minus 0.4 for my opponent, so it isn't really a big deal. Now, black rather brings their knight into the position. I play rook d1, trying to put my rook on a file that might be open later on, because if these pieces move out of the way, this pawn is under attack. My opponent attacks my knights. I play b6 here. I play b6 to defend this pawn in case this knight moves and this rook goes on the c8 square. But apparently that is an inaccuracy which the computer doesn't like. My opponent plays b5, and this is where they start to go wrong because I have more attackers on this pawn than they have defenders. So it simply takes, takes. For some reason, it keeps double pressing. I press the next button once and it's moving twice. But anyways, takes, and here I can just take that pawn. There are a few other moves that the computer is recommending. Like I could push this pawn, arguing that it's being defended by this knight, right? And even if the bishop takes the knight, this knight defends that knight. But anyways, I decide to just take and maintain a small advantage because this bishop defends the pawn. So we have knight takes bishop with check, and I take the knight. And this move apparently is a blunder because now I'm just up a pawn. And after queen g5, I'm just winning another pawn. So I take the pawn. They take the pawn on a6, but I don't really care about that pawn in this position. In this position, I'm just realizing that I could have played a4 just to make sure that black doesn't manage to win the pawn. But anyways, time is very important here. So I decide to simply fork the rook and the bishop. Yeah. So I saw this move and I saw that, okay, a knight attacks the rook and the bishop. So my opponent brings the bishop into the game. But unfortunately, this doesn't work. They're threatening checkmate, but the queen does a good job of defending this square. So I simply take. They bring their rook in, attacking my queen, and again, I simply move out of the way with check again, so this comes with tempo. And after the king moves, I play g3. Now here, I know that I'm going to lose my rook, but I'm already up the exchange. Like, at this point, I'm up like 6 points of material, so it doesn't really matter. I can afford to lose the rook just to maintain my small advantage. Actually, it's 5 plus 5.2. This makes things easier for me. I lose a bit of material, but at the end of the day, I'm still winning. And here, my opponent decides to take. I take with the rook so that I can uh, maintain defense on this square in case the queen decides to go back. My opponent brings the rook back, and here they hang another fork. So the knight forks the rook and the queen, and in this position, my opponent resigned. So this was an interesting game, but everything went downhill after my opponent played b5, essentially sacrificing a pawn for no compensation. And in this game, let me see, according to the computer evaluation, I played it at 93% accuracy with zero mistakes, zero blunders, and two inaccuracies. So that was an interesting game. Alright, so let's get into the second game. I'm playing as black and my opponent starts with e4. I play c5, planning on playing my normal Sicilian setup. They go knight f3, I go d6 because I play the knight off. If d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3, then a6, then we're in the main line of the knight off, open lines. But here my opponent plays c3, and this is known as the delayed Alapin. So it's the delayed Alapin because white plays knight f3 first. In the normal Alapin, they play something like they play c3, then I play d4, then we have something like takes, then knight c3 here. But in the delayed Alapin, they play knight f6 first, knight c3 first rather. So d6, c3, knight f6, and here my opponent defends with d3. Now it's important to note that if my opponent were to play something like bishop e2, I cannot take this pawn because there's this trap with where the queen checks, and if I block, the queen takes my knight. And I've actually lost some games, a lot of games actually, because of this trap when I was a bit lower rated. Okay, but in this position, d3 defends the pawn because my opponent doesn't expect me to fall for it, and I play normal moves, knight c6, e5. So sort of one of the disadvantages of playing these sidelines is that black gets a free hand in the position. I can just play natural moves. By the way, the blue arrows indicate the best lines according to the engine. So here it's just normal development, and my opponent decides to play a3, which the computer doesn't like. It would have preferred if my opponent went for c5, gaining more space and restricting the movement of my pieces. Because here it's hard for me to go for this plan because my rook is already on c8. This is typically what I like to do in these types of positions. So my opponent plays a6. It's a slow move which doesn't really accomplish much. I guess it's trying to control the b4 square, but here I play h6 as well. The computer doesn't like it. It would have preferred if I played d5. So a constant theme in this position is I'll make a move, but the best move in the position is d5 because in the Sicilian, d5 is known as a freeing advance, right? If my opponent takes and I take, all of a sudden my position is no longer cramped and I can move my pieces much more freely. This gives me more space in the position. So from this position, you find that d5 was the best move. I play h6, just preventing any tricks. I don't want knight g4 attacking my bishop because I don't want to trade this bishop. Now my opponent plays knight b d2. This is also inaccurate because again their best move was c4 in this position. Now I play a6 because I'm trying to go for this plan. It also shows as an accuracy because again I should play d5 in this position. So that's a constant theme. Here the rook is on the same diagonal as my queen. I decide to play b5, and after the queen moves, because their queen is on the same diagonal as my rook, they're afraid that if any trades happen here, right, their queen is going to be on the line of fire. So I play queen c7 because I don't want my queen to be on the same line as their rook. But again, the best move was d5. They bring their rook here. I don't want my queen to be on the same line as their rook. So again, I move my queen. It's like a constant theme. But in this position, the best move was also d5. Anyways, after d4 from my opponent, takes, we trade. And here, their best move was to take with the knight so that they can maintain the bishop pair. But they decide to take with their bishop. And this gives me a slight edge because now I have the bishop pair. Now the bishop pair, when you have both bishops, because when one of the bishops attacks the light squares, the other one attacks the dark squares, you pretty much have control of most of the squares on the board. Whereas when you only have one bishop, you don't have as much control on the darker squares. So for anyone who is wondering why having the bishop pair can be a slight advantage. Now my opponent takes, and in this position, the computer recommended move is to bring my bishop back or try to defend my bishop with the queen so that after they take, I could take with the queen or I don't lose my bishop. But here I thought I'm fine. If they take, I'll take with the pawn. Now this rook is targeting that foul. Anyways, I decided to bring my knight back because I realized that it's not doing much. By the way, when I was making the exchanges, unfortunately I miscalculated. I thought that I would be able to win this pawn, but the pawn is defended twice because of this knight. So I missed that this knight was defending the pawn. I bring my knight here trying to reroute it. They bring their bishop into the position. I move my queen up. I regretted this move because later on I thought maybe knight e5 would have been better. This attacks the bishop and if they and restricts the move e5, right? Because here I'm afraid of e5 because it attacks my queen. Anyways, I move my queen up. It also comes with tempo because it attacks the knight. I'm expecting them to take and then I take back, but they decide to defend with their queen, which is a blunder. And it's a blunder because of 95 rather. I attack the bishop, I attack the queen. Now the queen has to move. It can't move here because the knight is hanging. It can't move here. Well, it can move there. It can't move here because of the rook. Can't move here because of the bishop. Now the queen moves here. And here I missed something. The best move for me is actually, so the blue arrows, but the best move of all of them is bishop g5 because now I'm attacking the queen. The queen has no good square that keeps defending the knight. So if the queen moves back, now I'm just up a piece. Unfortunately, I missed that during the game and I played bishop f6, just trying to defend the knights, keep control of the diagonals, and apparently that was a blunder. Anyways, my opponent decides to play b5 and this is another blunder because now I have control of the c5 square, right? c4 square rather. When the pawn was still on b2, they could play b3 later on if I were to decide to put a piece here. But now I put my bishop there. It's not the best move. The computer would have preferred again if I played bishop g5. So this move is still available in the position. But I didn't see it. So here I bring my knight in because now I'm attacking the rook. And I guess I bring my knight in, and I'm also disconnecting the rook from the knight. No, 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 no. I bring my knight in, and since the knight is no longer here, the knight attacks the rook, but now we have a double attack on this knight as well. So in this position, my position is better. My opponent decides to move their rook up, and here I simply win the knight. They take, I take, they take my knight because their position is cramped. Sometimes, even though the knight is generally 3 points, but sometimes when you have a knight this far advanced that is defended, it could be worth just as much as the rook. So my opponent was probably annoyed with the knight. They take with they take my knight with their rook. I could take their rook with the pawn. Actually, this is the best move according to the computer because again, this attack is still being maintained. I'm still attacking their rook here and their queen, but I decide to win the queen. And in this position, I'm simply way better, right? Because I have the queen and they don't. And after a few moves, I'll just show how the game ended. Check, they decide to pile up on the g7 square, but this blunder is made in one because queen g1 is simply checkmate. So this was an interesting game in the delayed Alapin. Wasn't the most accurate game because a lot of good moves were missed and there were a lot of blunders. So I had a 80% accuracy in this game. 3 mistakes, 5 inaccuracy, 1 blunder. But again, this is a blitz game, and typically in crazy Sicilians, it's normal to expect some inaccuracies. Right. So let's move on to the third game. Actually, I just realized that the third game is not an Alapin, so it's a bit different from the other games, but it was still a Sicilian, which starts with e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. So we get into the open lines, and here my opponent plays knight f6 first. So like I said, this could turn into a Sveshnikov really quickly, but my opponent plays d6 in this position. Now, the lines highlighted in blue are the most commonly played lines, and also some of the supposedly best lines according to the engine. So those are the most commonly played lines according to table base. But I decided to go bishop e2 here because I think I had seen a position like this recently, and this should be fine for me if black plays, let's say, e6. However, I wish I had played bishop c4 because after my opponent played g6, I thought this move was really passive. And typically, because this turns into a dragon Sicilian, and typically in the dragon, you want this bishop to be on c4. So yeah, it turns into something of a dragon. Or maybe it's a classical Sicilian because this knight is here. I believe in the dragon, this knight also goes here. Yeah, this knight goes here much like the knight of. But anyways, after bishop e2, I was kind of like disappointed because my position is a bit passive. So I followed up with bishop e3. I'm just going to claim that I have slightly more space. And here my plan is f3, g4, g5. This is my preferred plan in these types of positions. So I play f3, my opponent castles, queen d2, they take, I take back. Also, I should have realized that in this position, this type of system doesn't work because it's much like an accelerated dragon now that I think of it, because black can play d5 and d5 liberates their position because now their position is no longer cramped, right? If takes, I believe this knight can take, and then we're just going to trade a bunch of pieces in the center, and this isn't great for me in any way. So luckily my opponent didn't see the d5 move. So yeah, I think this is an accelerated dragon. Right, so it even says Sicilian Defense Dragon variation because of the early exchange, I think. So takes bishop e3, and now I decide to follow up with my plan. So typically I play h4 first because if black plays a passive move, you could play like h5, and after the knight takes, you get to play g4. G4 maybe in this position takes first, but the plan is something like you can chase the knight away with g4. If queen takes, yeah, you chase the knight away with g4, and then you come in with this check. So you're attacking the pawn, and after the queen moves, you could play g5. If this knight moves, it's basically checkmate. So that was the plan. But because it's more of an accelerated dragon position, this h5 move doesn't work because here black plays h4 move rather. Black simply plays. What did my opponent play? I believe they played h5. Yeah, and this basically delays my plan. In this position, I decide to castle, but the computer wants me to play g4, and we'll see why in a bit. But I decide to castle, and after rook c8, I play g4 nonetheless, even though it's defended multiple times. So after takes, funny enough, the computer wants me to play g5, h5 rather, because of this crazy line that takes, takes, takes. If takes, I could bring my queen in, right? So after takes, it's basically bring my queen somewhere here and threaten mate. So something like this would follow, and they can't even take back because their queen would be hanging. So that's the crazy thing. But then again, this is a 3+2 blitz game. Maybe in a rapid game I would have seen this, because you always consider what would happen if you were to if you were to you always consider what would happen if you were to, let's say, take, but to push the pawn. But this might have taken me like 5 minutes of calculation. So instead I take, which is a bad move, because now after queen a5, which I didn't see, my dreams are crushed, right? If this move wasn't played, let's say queen c5 was played, or even let's say knight takes, this would be good for me because I just take, queen takes. I could take, or I could even play h5, I believe. I'm trying to undermine this construction because what I want is to trade these pawns and then bring my queen in, trying to go for checkmate ideas. But after queen a5, this basically destroys my hopes and dreams because this square is defended one more time and it is by the queen. Also, this queen is attacking my a2 pawn. But in this position, the computer still wants me to go h5, interestingly. Because if takes, what's the move? If takes, there's takes, and then, yeah, I basically have the same plans of attacking on this side of the board. And now this is defended by the, even though the knight and the queen are both attacking, this is defended by the bishop. However, I hesitated because I was afraid of, in this position, I was afraid of rook takes, right? I thought if I go here, what happens if rook takes and I take? I was afraid of ideas of the queen coming in here and checkmate will be threatened. But apparently, after rook takes, I can push h6 straight away. Now the bishop has to retreat, and if the bishop retreats, I'll just win the rook. So that's the crazy thing. And the computer line goes rook takes, I believe, and then I have to take back, check, takes, bishop c4. So we basically get this position which is supposed to be balanced, right? Black has two extra pawns. I'm up the exchange, but black has a knight for two pawns. So the position is basically equal. I don't think my opponent would have seen that, would have seen the sacking move if I had gone h6, or maybe they would have because they're going to lose the rook anyways. Anyways, I was afraid of this move, so I decided to. Uh, I was afraid of the sack, so I decided to play a6. Again, another line is if takes, if I push takes, I get to push again, right? Which is why I'm way better there. But I play a3. This position, my opponent decides to take because now there's no longer threats of checkmate, and again I decide to take back and they take, but apparently this is a mistake because now I can bring my queen in. So this game was full of missed opportunities, right? I'm attacking their queen. If they cannot retreat their queen, because if they do retreat, I take the bishop. If they take back, I take. So I get to win a piece. Now black is forced to take, and after takes and say takes, I get takes, 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 And this is basically threatening checkmate, right? If you move your rook away, this is checkmate because the rook is defended by the pawn, which is defended by the bishop. So the position gets quite exciting here. The bishop has to go back, and now I can win the rook with check. But again, I missed that. Instead, I decided to take back. After take back, I trade the bishops, and here, again, the move that I have to play is rook g1. And the idea of this move is I'm attacking the knight, and the knight has to move away. But it's not really a big deal. I think it becomes a big deal in a different position. So here I decide to push the pawn, right? And like I was afraid of in this entire game, my opponent. Ooh, the best move was to sack the rook here. Sack the rook. I was aware of this move throughout the entire game actually. But here they decide to play g5. And yeah, the rook g1 move that I talked about is actually very effective in this position because now the knight cannot go back because it's basically checking ideas, right? It's check. So the queen is going to be lost after takes and takes. And again, I missed that in this position. Instead, I decided to check and they block. I bring my queen back, and here black sacks the rook for the knights. And basically, they're opening up my position because after takes, they're just gonna bring their knight back or something. Let's see what happens after takes. There's knight f6, and then yeah, they have more than enough compensation here. I'm not winning this pawn anytime soon. This attack doesn't really do much. Their rook is going to come into the game. This rook is passive. So I didn't want this. So I decided to take their knight just to make things a little bit more complicated. I knew that I was worse in the position, but given that it's a 3+2 game, I thought, okay, leaving the both of the rooks in actually favors me. Plus, after this move, the their rook is still hanging, right? So I expected the rook to move backwards. But unfortunately, my opponent has this move, rook g3. The rook is defended by the queen. So this would have been great if the rook is forced to go back, right? At least it wouldn't have been as bad. But since the rook can attack my queen, I have to bring back my queen, and this position is basically a time scramble. At this point, it was a time scramble. So I decided to attack their queen because we're both running on a few seconds now, and anything can happen when you pressure your opponent. Their queen checks, I move away, and here this was a blunder which I again missed. This equalizes because if I take, right, the queen has to move away to some square. So I basically win a pawn here. Takes. The rook cannot take, their rook cannot take this rook because they lose the queen. Again, that's another missed tactic, but when you're running on 3-4 seconds, you're not really thinking about that. So here I just decide to retreat my queen, and here my opponent was the one who blundered. Because now I can play rook d3, basically attacking their queen and attacking their rook, which is also attacked by my queen. And when they move their queen away, I basically take, and now I'm up a full rook. My opponent decides to take that pawn which was hanging. And since we're running on seconds, like I said, I missed that the queen was also attacking the rook. And now I go from basically winning to equal again, right? I have to move the rook back in this position. I'm also seeing that, okay, I can't take this pawn because I'm in check. I decide to move my king up, and now they can check me again, and they're way better. I don't want to move my queen back, so I play b3. My opponent is basically winning in this position. I attack their queen, they attack my queen. They want to trade because they're up 2 pawns, I believe. Actually, my opponent is up, yeah, they are up 2 pawns. I'm going to lose this pawn very soon, and they're going to be up 3 pawns. So I don't want to trade. And here my opponent decides to take the pawn, and they blunder their rook. So this game was a crazy game full of blunders in a tight time scramble because we are both running on just seconds at this point. And in this position, my opponent decided to resign. So this was, I don't know if this game was very instructive or instructive at all, but I guess in the sense that bishop e2 is a bit of a passive move in this position. Otherwise, it was a crazy game full of a lot of inaccuracies and mistakes. And let me check out the computer evaluation. Yeah, I have a 68% accuracy, and my opponent had a 56% accuracy, which just shows that both of us played a very bad game. But in a 3 plus 2 time control, and especially in Blitz, blunders like that are to be expected at this level. Now, the fourth game was actually a relatively quick Alapin game. So I play again. It was another Sicilian, and my opponent plays the Alapin, which is an opening that I really dislike because it tends to lead to drier positions. Right when you play the Sicilian is one of those openings that is dynamic and exciting, but the Alapin just kills the fun out of the Sicilian because you end up in quieter positions. And actually, the Alapin is one of the lines in the Sicilian that is played by a lot of players when they're comfortable with the draw. For example, the best player in the world right now, Magnus Carlsen, has used this several times in a tournament when he simply needs a draw to, let's say, win the tournament or to progress to the next round. So if you want to draw with white against the Sicilian at the highest levels, typically the Alapin is one of the openings that people go for. As you can see, these are some of the most recent games played in the Alapin. We have as far as recently as 2025 Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri, and I'm sure there's a lot of other games that have been played recently in the Alapin. So I really don't like this opening because it kills the fun of the Sicilian. But anyways, the there are two main moves here. There's Knight f6, which I've never played before, and I think I mentioned this in a recent video. And this is the line that results out of that, one of the main lines at least. I guess this is a bit more dynamic, but it's still drawish. And then there's the line that I first learned to play. So when I was learning the Sicilian, I picked up a book called Starting Out the Sicilian, and in that book, the recommended move is like d5. So typically, my repertoire is against the moves that people play often. I try to know several variations, but since you rarely face the Alapin on lichess, I'm comfortable with just a draw every now and then because I don't really have major issues in these positions. Anyways, my opponent proceeds with d5. I play knight f6, bishop e3, takes. Here my plan is e6, knight c6, bishop e2, castles, and then we'll decide where we put this bishop. It might go to d7. I might play a6 at some point to restrict the knights, to restrict this knight, that is. Also, typically you don't want to bring your queen early in the opening, but the reason why you're able to get away with d5 here is because after takes, my opponent doesn't have knight c3 attacking my queen with tempo. Because this pawn, the c3 move that they play, takes away that square. So anyways, back to the original position. Knight c6, they attack my queen, I simply bring it back. And here I play bishop e2, following my plan. a6, I like to play a6 b5 in the Sicilian if I can. And this move by my opponent is simply terrible because they have two pieces on this file. I already want to play b5, and after b5, now I can play b7 freely. And after rook c8, this knight will also be under attack. So it's a suboptimal move from my opponent there. Anyways, b4, b5, but it's only minus 0.3 in my favor, so it's not a big deal. I play bishop b7, which is what I intended to play. Actually, in this position, the computer says I could play. Okay, I think I'll show those variations later. Bishop b7, castles. I can actually play a6 in this position, which is crazy. So all the three recommended moves are very strange moves, right? Because it feels unintuitive to bring your knight back. It feels unintuitive. Also, my opponent here had. Okay, let me finish the first thought. This move I can understand because you're basically liberating the bishop. This knight can always go to a different square. And then there's this move. They can't really take because after takes, well, they can. The bishop is under attack, so the bishop would have to go back. Then maybe you could bring your knight in. No, you can't bring your knight in. But anyways, the point is my opponent cannot take this pawn at a later time because of bishop a6. Actually, they can because after bishop a6, there is uh, there is a4. So I guess the idea here is bishop has to go back, and then what? Knight c4. Let's say bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. Alright, so the idea is we're just going to trade all the pawns because this bishop is defended by the rook. So that's a possibility, but there's no way I'm finding that in a blitz game. So here I decide to just sidestep with my queen. I want to connect my rooks. And very quickly I realize that this is a bad decision because now they bring their rook in, right? And this rook is on the same line as my queen. And as I decide to play rook c8 because I'm just going to bring my queen on b on b8. The rooks are connected and this diagonal is fine even though it seems passive. My opponent decides to push, which apparently wasn't the best move in this position, but it kind of makes sense because my opponent has what's known as an isolated queen's pawn. This pawn is on its own, and if we trade a lot of pieces, this pawn becomes weak. So I guess they saw an opportunity to like uh, exchange with my e pawn, and they went for it. So I take, they take. So I wonder what's the recommended move here. Okay, yeah, the computer just wants them to continue with. I guess this makes more sense because now they have an extra defender of the square. Let's see, which is why white's advantage is 0.5. I'm curious, after queen b8, this now, let's do a no. And there's h3. Like, the moves that are being recommended for me are extremely passive. Then like knight g5, maybe with ideas of going here and trading, I don't know. Or there might also be some sacrifices here after the bishop moves. So yeah, white has the initiative here, no doubt. But after d5, I guess the position is clarified, and we end up in this equal middle game with a lot of open lines. Now in this position, I do what I intended on doing, which is I bring my queen back because after I don't want any sneaky stuff after the trades here. Now my opponent decides to play g3, and immediately I realize that this is a terrible move because my bishop is on this diagonal already. Now the queen has to stay defending the knight. I guess the bishop is defending the knight, but now the bishop is hanging. I get the bishop pair. It's an open position. And after I move this knight, there'll be all sorts of tricks on this diagonal. So this gives me the edge. So I take, they take. This knight is attacking my bishop. Now the computer wants me to play like rook d8, rook e8, queen d6, but I decided to maintain my bishop pair because I really like having the two bishops since we have a lot of open lines here. So I decided to go bishop d6, and one of the reasons why I went for this is even though this seems to be a bad diagonal because it's blocked by this g pawn, I wanted to go knight e5 and then trade. After trades, this knight would be attacked, so that was my plan. But I'm seeing now that it would have been an issue because let's say my opponent doesn't do anything. I'm seeing that this might have been an issue. If takes takes, my opponent has this, forking my queen and my rook. So I guess I would have realized that in this position and taken this knight instead. Wait, what am I supposed to do? Okay, trade here first. After the trade, but then this becomes crazy. Okay, after the trades, then take this knight first. No? Oh, okay. I'm supposed to. Taking this knight first is an issue because now I get forked this way. But now I can take this because there's no longer. The rook is no longer there, so I'm no longer forked. I'm sure I could have figured this out during the game, but yeah. So I guess that's why bishop d6 wasn't the best move. But again, it's a 3+2 game. I'm trying to play quickly, be up on the clock, and put pressure on my opponent. So my opponent brings their knight here. It seems like a good square because it attacks the rook, but this is one of those moves which is just a one move threat, right? Because again, once this bishop moves away from this diagonal, now this knight is under fire from my queen. So it's easy for me to refute this move because I just move my rook away. They can't fork my queen and my rook because this rook defends. Okay, my opponent proceeds to play bishop f6, and according to the computer, I should just play rook f e8 or even bishop e7, right? With bishop e7, I'm attacking the bishop, and they cannot take, I believe, because I get to play. Wait. What do I get to play here? Knight takes e4. Oh, okay. Queen takes, and then I take there. No, queen takes, and then rook f e8. Knight d7. That wouldn't play that. Let's say. Now this. I'm down a piece now that knight is hanging. So I guess they play this. Queen a8. Now the queen has to move, right? Knight b6. Takes. Yeah, so in this resulting position, I'm supposed to be slightly better because I have the bishop versus knight in an open position. So that's a pretty crazy move. I'm kind of glad that I went for the move that I did because that gets extremely complicated, which is why I just in this position I just went f6, right? No need to get into any complications in this time control. Here my opponent could have played queen e6. I didn't see this during the time. The only check that I saw was the queen a2. But nonetheless, my opponent decides to bring their bishop back, and this is a terrible move because now I attack their queen. I attack the queen and the knight is also attacked twice. But then the queen can check me. I move out of the way, and this was the basically how the game ended because now my opponent should have just taken and traded on this square because now after the bishop goes here, I take their knight with check, and basically the knight is also defended by the bishop. They can't take the knight after the queen moves. I could actually do this now, check, because the bishop attacks the king again, and this is basically checkmate. So this was an interesting Alapin game. I was on the back foot, but my opponent, I guess, blundered by. This was a bad move. This is what's known as a one move threat that doesn't really accomplish anything in the position, right? So after this move, my opponent was basically lost, right? So let's go straight into. Now, this next game was another Kalashnikov actually. So I'm gonna go through it quickly because the first few moves are similar to the first game that we analyzed. So again, same move order as game one. D6 to defend the D6 square. C4, and here I go for the same setup. Now my opponent decides to defend. I takes. Now that I think about it, maybe I should have played knight c3. No, knight c3 first looks like a bad idea because they could take. Then after takes, no, if they take, I take. So maybe that's fine. Let's see. Yeah, it's not the best idea because a6. No. It would be some sort of It would get back to some sort of Sveshnikov position, I guess, where black is better because of the development. And this is not what I want. Okay, so actually, black is better because of this tactic. Yes. Material count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So after this position, black is basically a pawn up. I guess I could play this move, but because they can't take because the king is pinned. But black has the more active pieces, so you don't really want to go for that. So in this position, I decided to just take, and here my opponent takes with the g pawn, which, believe it or not, is actually an option in the Sveshnikov types of lines. Of course, this came out of a Kalashnikov, but this is an option because now the rook can come in here attacking this side. I thought about playing g3 here, but I also thought it's passive because I want my bishop somewhere on this diagonal. But these are the three best moves in this position, according to the engine. I develop my knights. The engine wants me to basically play this way. If takes, I could always take back with my knight, so it's not really a big deal. Or just castle, queenside for them at the moment. Anyways, I put my knight on the most natural square, and I guess this would also be a good move because now this knight could still go back to c3, and then more support on the e4 square. So we get takes. I develop my knight. They attack my knight. I bring back my knight. And here queen f5 is played. And now the computer says it's a mistake because I could just bring my knight back. But this knight is pinned, right? I could bring this knight back. Maybe try to castle on the queen side. But that's not what I was thinking about in the game. And for some reason I decided to play queen c2. And this basically loses my advantage because this other knight comes in the temple. And then I have to go to d2. I decided to go here instead. So black has a huge advantage because they're just going to come in, try to trade pieces. For example, if f5 comes in, right, taking would be a bad idea because now the bishop takes. The bishop is defended by the knight. So basically my position is just cramped, and black has liberated their position even though they can't castle this side. They could always castle queen side if they need to. But lucky for me, my opponent decides to develop a piece which is normal in the opening, which gives me sort of like a free hand. And here I saw that because of this knight attacking this squares and some of these pieces might get into the position, I saw that maybe castling queenside might not be such a bad idea because like a move like bishop e2 just seems too slow here, right? Because my position is cramped. So I thought, okay, let me just castle queenside. And bishop e2. Let's just see the official refutation. There's sorry. If I play bishop e2, the refutation again is d5, and let's see castles. Let's do something that I would actually do castles, and then there is bishop takes. Yeah, basically I'm just losing stuff in this position. That's not even the move because of knight takes. So some of these moves I'm seeing on the fly. Okay, now my queen has to go back. Queen takes c4. Queen takes c3. Oh damn! If takes, there's this. I move away my king. Yeah. So intuitively, I just knew that my position. There's something wrong with castling kingside. I didn't calculate that entire variation, but I thought, let me castle queenside. This has to be right in this position. Even though I rarely castle queenside in the night of, in the open lines of the Sicilian, as whites, in Sveshnikov lines rather. Anyways, my opponent continues attacking my position. And here this is a blunder because now my position is a bit more liberated. They had a better move. F takes, knight takes. Yeah, see, as you can see, these Sveshnikov lines can be quite unintuitive sometimes. But in this position, I decided to bring my knight over, right? Yes, I guess this move was a little bit too slow, right? Because black isn't really going to accomplish anything here, and it gives me time to bring my pieces into action. They attack my rook. I bring it here because I don't want any tricks on this square in case I move my knight, right? If I move my knight, there's ideas of bishop c2 check if my rook is somewhere else like here. Also, I couldn't really move my. I guess I didn't really have a choice because I couldn't move my rook to e1 because now the queen takes. So rook c1. The bishop comes in, but this is a terrible move because now, actually, even f3 I guess is fine. Yeah, so I guess I should have played f3. But in this position, for some reason, I was afraid of this bishop. I decided to chase it away. Luckily, they bring their bishop back, and here I shut down the door. So There's going to be a lot of inaccuracies in this position, which is typical in these types of Sicilians. I attack their bishop, trying to gain space. I'm struggling with to find a way to bring my rook into the game, so I thought maybe this might be useful at some point. They bring their bishop back. I'm trying to trade off this knight because it's very annoying. They bring their knight back. I push my g pawn. Now this move is basically a pawn sacrifice, but I'm trying to get activity because I'm cramped here. I know that I'm worse, so I have to do something active. Also, I figured I'll win this pawn back at some point. So bishop h3, I'm attacking the knight. This knight has been very annoying, so I'm attacking it because if they move the knight, I'm going to win their rook. Now my opponent nonetheless decides to move their knight because it comes with tempo on the queen, which I didn't see. I move my queen out of the way. They move their knight back. Also here I'm realizing that there's like ideas of g4, of b4 rather. So anyways, there's lots of tricks here for me. But I simply decide to win the pawn back, and after b5 I realized that taking here is not a good idea because now I'm just reinforcing the attack, right? I would like this to stay shut. So I take the pawn, they bring their pawn in. Again, I put my knight back on d5. So this was a very uncomfortable game for me because I was basically cramped the whole time. My position wasn't free. Here I make a very huge blunder because I should simply bring my knight here. Actually, the better move would be just to move my king away because the threat here is knight c3 check, right? It's knight c3 because now I can simply take. If my When I play this move, black can still play knight c3 check. But I actually played this move with a few seconds left on the clock, so like I had like 2 seconds or something because I was trying to tempt black into taking because now I get to win their queen. What I didn't see is that black has this move check. Now I cannot take because if I take, this comes with check, right? And basically I'm losing the queen next move. But lucky for me, since both me and my opponent were very low on time, they ended up losing on time because my opponent froze and the game ended. The game ended after this move, I believe. Did it? Yeah, the game ended after this move. White wins on time. So this was the fifth game. Very crazy game where my opponent was basically attacking me the whole time. So the fatal mistake was queen c2 here. Yeah, if I had just played like knight c2 or bishop d3, I would have been fine. Anyways, let's move on to the last game. That's 5 games already. So yeah, that was the last game that I won. The next game was another Alapin, but then I was better off in the entire game. So I played 6 games yesterday. This was the most recent game. It was another Alapin. My opponent decided to give up the pawn. My opponent gave up a pawn, and I just tried to hold on to it by playing bishop f4. Bishop f5. I knew this was risky because the queen could come in with all sorts of attacks, but yeah, so maybe it wasn't the best option. But basically, I held on to the pawn throughout the entire game. Takes, takes, and here I missed an interesting tactic. I missed that if I take and they take, I can just take back with the bishop, and after takes, I'm basically 2 pawns up in that position. By taking here, I allow them to win back 1 pawn, and basically I'm 1 pawn up instead of 2. I blundered here, my opponent blundered, I could have taken the rook. So this was a game full of blunders. It was interesting though because I had this sacrifice, takes. If takes, I have this move. The queen has to move away. If takes, there's check. I'm winning back the piece. Another check, and basically I'm up a million pieces here. But I didn't see that. So this was a very interesting and dynamic game. This is one of those games that I would definitely win in a rapid tournament. But In Blitz, it's a different story. So I didn't play all the right moves, and here I ended up blundering. I should have just kept checking my opponent, but then I didn't. Lost my advantage, regained equality, and I missed that I could just take here. So this was a silly way to lose, and this is basically how I lost, right? Again, we were down to like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Yeah, it was a very fast game at the end there. We were both very low on time, and this is how I lost the sixth game. So I had 5 wins and 1 loss on this particular day. So reaching this far, I think this is the end of the video. I know that it was a bit clumsy towards the end there. I think fatigue was starting to set in, and also there are a lot of lines that I began to see whilst I already started recording. So maybe if I saw the lines earlier, the video might have been shorter. But that's usually the nature of Sicilians. There's lots of tactics that go on in the position, and I'm starting to see them. It's sort of like one of those things that happens where the moment you start to speak, right, you notice something when you say it out loud. So I guess that's what happened today. Now that I'm explaining the moves, I was able to see some other things that I wasn't able to see when preparing for the video. Anyways, I'm going to stop yapping now and conclude this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe if you want to watch more videos because the quality will keep increasing as I get used to making these videos. Without further without further ado, okay, so I just realized that my internet is off, so I'm just going to end the video here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the like button. I lost my train of thought. Okay. Um, the quality of the videos is going to improve as I progress, and I might cover some historical games as well, and maybe opening lines as well. In particular, maybe the Night Off, which is what I'm mostly familiar with. So yeah, I'll stop yapping now, and see you next time. Bye. Okay, I'm just realizing that it didn't stop recording, so bye now.